Welcome and thanks for joining us today. I'm Adrian Caddy, I'm the founder of the design consultancy Greenspace, and I'm here today with my good friend Craig McDonald, who's the CEO of Evari Bikes.
Hi.
We're going to talk to you today about the birth of a better e-bike and the journey that Evari and Greenspace have been on together for the last couple of years.
Yeah.
We go back a long time.
About 12, 15 years?
Yeah, that's right. We first worked together on the launch of the Honda F1 Earth car in 2008. And then a couple of years later, the Formula One World Championship winning Brawn GP team.
Yeah, that's right, yeah.
I've always known you as a really accomplished filmmaker, but I came to realise actually you're much more than that. You're a really accomplished product designer. Oh. And I know because a couple of years ago you came to visit us at our studio and you brought this amazing full-scale 3D printed bike.
A very fragile 3D printed bike, yeah.
and a business presentation that really blew us all away.
Yeah.
And I think that was the thing that sort of got us going. So just for people who maybe like to understand the story, how did you come to be interested in designing a bike? I
mean, I've always been really interested in bikes. From the age of 8, I grew up racing motocross and then BMX and more recently mountain biking. One of my best friends, we used to build tracks together. He does that in competition tracks now. And in fact, the first bikes that we had back at the age of 6 years old, I brought back from Canada 2 Schwinn Stingrays that we cut down, and we still joke that they were the first BMXs in the UK.
So moving forward from BMX, why e-bikes and why now?
So I've been tracking e-bikes since around 2010, but the form factor of motors and batteries back then meant it was so cumbersome, quite ugly to put onto a bike. So I've been waiting until all these things get a little bit smaller, always quite interested in developing something. And then in 2000, I think it was about 2016 when Audi brought out their concept bike, the Wörthersee, and I thought, I've got to have one of those bikes. They look so cool. And when I realized it was a concept bike, it was never going to be for sale, I thought, well, probably not the only person around that would love one of those bikes, slightly out of the box. And so I started sketching.
But you know that there's a lot more to designing a bike than sketching.
Yeah, of course. And I ran a visual effects company, a CG company, for 15 years. We did a lot of car launches for Jaguar Land Rover, for Ford, and of course working with yourself. So I've always had a bias towards engineering and automotive design, which gave me a lot of skills that I needed to do this. And I started out on my own, and it allowed me to go through the process a lot quicker, given that I was the person designing and also rendering, and I used all my 3D skills to take that forward and move it forward quickly. But as we all know, nothing's ever done in a vacuum, and so I needed to build up a team. So I looked at who I needed in terms of bike geometry, given that that's the core, and then bike production, and beyond that, engineering, and so it kind of unfolded from there.
And for people who don't necessarily understand the processes of designing and building and prototyping a bike, talk us through that. What are the steps?
Well, the first steps are to define a brief for the bike. Obviously, there's racing bikes, mountain bikes, commuters. Is it a sporty commuter or is it more laid back? And so working with a guy, Jeff, at Ride Style in Holland, we developed the geometry based around something which was all road or on-off road or gravel. So it had road capabilities and some gravel capabilities. And that was the first brief. Beyond that, we started sketching in 2D, but because of my background, as I mentioned, I was able to get into 3D pretty quickly. And so a lot of the kind of concept work went straight into 3D rather than 2D sketches for a long period. At some point, you want to take it off the page or off the screen and make something physical. You need to stand next to it. You need to look and see what it looks like, what it feels like, which is where we started building the prototype, the 3D prototype that you mentioned. And of course, the volume of a 3D printer is quite small, so I think we made it out of 50 or 60 individual parts bonded and welded together. And that's where we made prototype number 1.
So from that 3D printed bike that we were talking about, that we saw and everyone fell in love with, you could see that the proportions were what you wanted, the aesthetic overall is what you wanted, but then you have to move into making your first rideable prototype, and I guess that means making out of carbon fibre. How do you do that?
Yeah, it's in fact making production bike number 1 in effect, and with that I spent 2 months in the Far East with the production factory, going through with their engineers, making the moulds, and the moulds are made out of large blocks of alloy. It's almost like a clamshell, so the two things that go together, the carbon fibres laid up inside these moulds, and then there's a latex in a bag that blows it out to the shape of the mould. It's a long process, and getting that right takes a number of months, but we did, and here it is.
So then, how many rideable prototypes did you have to, check the ride?
We've had 6 prototypes so far. We haven't changed the frame shape. We made some alterations to the way that the carbon belt is tensioned, so we locked the back end of the bike out. But other than that, it was more a couple of cosmetic changes. But effectively, rideable bike number 1 has been the one that we've used ever since.
So that brings us to the final design, which we can see right here. Can you tell us a little bit about it?
Yeah, first of all, we're really happy with how it turned out. Our mandate from the beginning was strength, lightness, and also minimalism. And so we've tried to declutter the whole bike as much as we could. And obviously using a carbon belt and a roll-off speed hub means that the derailleur's gone, the chain's gone, we've got a carbon belt. It's really quite nice. But I think in having done that and achieved this goal, we also knew we needed to look at the brand and how we convey that story of the brand. And that's when you and I started chatting again, and the chance to work with you again, knowing that you're passionate about automotive and mobility brands, was something that just it ticked all the boxes, and we've been going since then.
Well, so I think that the story of the brand sort of comes from a couple of places. I mean, to begin with, the name Evari comes from 2 words, EV meaning electric vehicle and mobility, and aria meaning air, and both those words together in a way describe the product. But I think for our task to be fully delivered upon, we had to go deeper, we had to think more about the vision for the business and really what the legacy idea should be to inform the business, not just now, but in perpetuity. So with that in mind, our first question to you was really why? Why are you doing this? What's the greater purpose than your own ambition? What's the legacy that matters most to you?
Ultimately, our ambition is to change the way that people move. As we know, we've gone through some remarkable changes in the last year with COVID-19. But beyond that, we've believed that getting people out of cars and freeing up congestion in city centres and town centres is the way forward for us all. But the ultimate question we needed to answer is how do we encourage drivers to get out of cars and onto a bike? And it's becoming clear that the bike needs to compete with a car in terms of convenience and comfort and ease of use, status, premium materials and world-class engineering. So that's what we embarked on here.
So that brings us to the building a better e-bike.
Yeah, indeed.
So the next question for us is around the target audience. Who do you have in mind as the Evari rider?
Traditionally, it's been an older person, maybe 45 to 70 years old, that doesn't quite have the strength, and that's how e-bikes are seen. And a lot of cyclists might tell you that e-bikes are cheating. But the truth is that people just want the convenience of getting places quicker and in a less strenuous way. And so the age of e-bike users has come down dramatically into the 20s. And in fact, when we were filming in London 3 or 4 weeks ago, We had 16-year-old or lads coming up to us and chatting to us about the Bosch motor or the roll-off system, and they were quite well informed, which for us that was a bit of a light bulb moment to think that actually e-bikes are a thing for every age group. And so we're looking from 16 years old to 75, 80 years old, and it can be anyone in that category.
And I think that's interesting because it really correlated with some broader insight gathering that we did around the fact that people in general are looking to find forward-thinking, optimistic brands with a message about innovation and great experience that they can really latch onto. So that really plays into that category as well, doesn't it?
Yeah. And I think we've achieved that with the brand. It appeals to a wider market rather than being categorised just to the older person or male or female. I think we've got that.
So all of that analysis led us to the positioning to create a pioneering mobility brand that embodies the quintessentially British values of understatement, sophistication and performance.
And that was really important to us, understanding or conveying where we're from and what we're all about. We love and admire companies like McLaren and Aston Martin and Jaguar Land Rover. And so there's a great heritage in British design, which is a perfect blend of elegance, engineering and styling. And that's what we wanted to convey.
And so for Evari to challenge the established bicycle market through a perfect blend of engineering excellence, extreme elegance, both together that deliver effortless experience. And this formed the three pillars of the brand and together encapsulated the legacy idea for Evari, arrive above.
Yeah, and in two words, it says it all.
Yes, and I think the simplicity of it is something that inspired us and made us want to carry it through the design of the Evari wordmark and the Evari brand symbol. For the wordmark, we wanted to create a strong, beautifully proportioned typeface. So the hand-drawn letters that we created have this ever so slightly extended quality to them, but there's a kind of a neo-Gothic style, which I think looks really restrained, and whether it's applied to the bike or any applications, really feels like a confident mark that will stand the test of time. And for the Evari symbol, which we call the E-bird, it takes its form and its proportion from the initial E, and it's inspired by a bird like a swift in flight. And the same proportions are carried through in the development of the acronyms for all of the various technical features that can be found on the bike. This is the foundation of the graphic language that we're developing together, and it will frame the lifestyle images and film for the bike, the product photography, its advertising, all the digital media, and in fact all touch points, including the all-important Evari customer app. So maybe you could tell us a little bit about the work on that.
The app is key to the product, but it's also key to the conversation that we have and the ethos of the Evari company. We want to have that conversation with our clients for years to come, and this gives us a platform to enable that. So everything from some ride telemetries, route planning, maintenance, ownership, warranty information, all that kind of thing. Then beyond that, as we look down the line, we will have a small store on there which will enable a customer to buy new tyres, new brake pads, new brake discs, things like that, usable items. And we've bound all this together into one app, and it sits in your pocket. It sits on the front of the bike. It's dual purpose, so it's multi-purpose. And we think it's an important addition to the bike.
Yeah, well, that all sounds great. And looking forward to the launch, you've been wearing your other hat as the accomplished filmmaker again, because you've been out shooting the bike, ready for launch. And from what I've seen, I must say, it looks absolutely fantastic.
Yeah, it was. It was great fun shooting it. We had great weather. A couple of days in London, a couple of days in Snowdonia. But again, as I said before, nothing's ever done in a vacuum. And Tor, who directed, Will, who produced, Tommy, the DOP, the guys on the bikes, Christian and Fiona, everyone was fantastic, and it made for a really pleasant shoot.
So, coming back to where it all started, how do you see now, in this journey you've been on for the last 3 to 5 years, what's the future of e-mobility?
Well, I think in the next few years you're going to see a lot of startup e-bike companies. Mobility is a hot topic. Deloitte's are suggesting that there's going to be 300 million e-bikes sold over the next 3 or 4 years. So with all that set out, there's going to be a lot of growth in the marketplace. And I think it's a really exciting time, to be at the forefront of a new form of mobility that's changing fundamentally the way that we move around cities, the way that we enjoy leisure time. And because of COVID-19, it's just kind of accelerated e-bikes into a different kind of realm, which probably would have took a lot longer without it. And in no small way, I think the government backing this new kind of move towards personal mobility and putting better infrastructure in and changing speed limits in city centres can only help. It puts the bike at the forefront of the street, rather than it being something that sits behind a car or sits behind a bus.
Yes, and that all ties into this move towards the circular economy, which is of great benefit to all of us.
Yeah, exactly.
So look, Craig, it's been great. But before we finish, we've had a few questions from our audience that I'd really like to put to you. So first up, beyond this bike, what's next for Evari?
Well, we're launching in October, and because of the bike world going through the circumstances they are at the moment, we won't have bikes back until the start of next year. And we're gonna kind of slowly ramp up next year. But in terms of demand, there's a lot of it at the moment, but we want to focus on our customers and giving them a great service. So that's at the forefront of our minds right now.
Another question which relates to the speed. How fast can the bike go?
It's a question that a lot of people ask, and in truth, it's 15.5 miles an hour or 25 kilometers an hour. Beyond that, the motor winds down and you're just pedaling yourself. Personally, I think it should be 20 miles an hour as it is in the States. And if you've got cars that are capped at 20 miles an hour in city centres today, why wouldn't you give a cyclist that advantage as well? Most people can ride above 15.5 miles an hour under their own speed anyway. So I'd like to see that rule changed in future. But still, 15.5 miles an hour is good, especially if you're going up hills.
But with higher speed, does there come a greater risk?
I don't think so. I think you should always ride within your capabilities. Perhaps this opens up a wider conversation about an e-cycling proficiency exam. At the moment, if you want to go faster, there is a speed pedelec which goes up to 29 miles an hour, and you need a CBT license for that, which is slightly draconian in the way it works because it's nominated as a light moped and you have to put registration plates on, but it's fundamentally just a bicycle. There are issues about cycle lanes, and I think they could be addressed by the government, but I think the speed of between 15 and let's say 28 miles an hour is not unheard of on a bike.
Yeah. Another question, where are the bikes being manufactured?
The bikes, all the carbon fibre parts of the bike are manufactured in the Far East, and it's not just an economic decision that you make there. It's also down to China and Taiwan have got much more experience and a much broader spectrum of companies that are able to build carbon frames, forks, handlebars out there. And in fact, 95% of the world's carbon fibre bikes are all manufactured in the Far East. All the other components, Bosch, Rohloff, they're German, Cellitalia is Swiss, so everything else on the bike is European.
Will you ever manufacture here?
Well, we are manufacturing some items here, some of the alloy components, and we feel proud about that. We feel proud about using British companies, and I'd like to do that more in future, and let's see where that takes us. We've got a very strong heritage of manufacturing in this country, and why wouldn't we use it?
And also from an environmental point of view?
There is the environmental reason as well, and you know, if we look at the company as a whole, across the whole spectrum of things, you know, the switching out light bulbs, that's one thing, but also shipping from the Far East. If we can make some things here, we can't make all of them here. If we can make some things here, then that reduces our footprint, and that's only a good thing. Another
question, where will the bike be launched and where will you be able to buy it?
So we're launching online, and we're selling online direct to customer as a primary model, but also through a number of kind of nominated partner bike stores as well. Our longer term ambition in the next 12, 18 months is to open a series of small brand centre shops across the country in some of the urban centres such as Manchester, London, Birmingham and possibly Edinburgh.
And you mentioned test drive. Will people be able to test ride the bike if they want?
Yeah, they'll be able to test ride in the bike shops that we work with. We're also looking at pop-ups for different places. So whether we open up in Manchester for a week and we give people the ability to come and ride the bikes then, Birmingham, we'll go on a road show to make sure we get as many people on our bikes as we can, because they're fun to ride.
Yeah, tell us a little bit about the riding experience. What's it like to ride the Evari?
It's great, and in fact, the reason we wanted to make it lightweight was to offset some of the e-componentry. So batteries are quite heavy, motors are quite heavy, but we've gone for carbon fibre, frame, forks, handlebars, seat post, crank arms, wheels. And that's to reduce the weight, which makes it a more nimble ride, much more like a traditional bike without any e-system in it.
The stance to me looks a little bit like a cruiser. Is that a fair description?
Well, it's a commuter, yes, a cruiser. You know, it's an on-off road or an all-road bike, which means it's capable of different functionality. You know, it's not for jumping on, it doesn't have suspension, but you can go through the woods on it, down the towpath and into London, and that's its MO really, is all road. But with that, whether you want to cruise the streets on it or you just want to get to work quicker or without raising as much of a sweat, then that's what it's for.
Yeah, I must admit, riding it myself, I found that initial takeoff sensation is amazing. You know, before you know it, you're whipping along and it's really effortless. Yeah. That feeling of being sort of carried along by, you know, some force beyond your own ability is a really great experience. I'm sure everyone will feel the same way.
Yeah, and we've got two gear mechanisms here. We've got a roll-off electronic 14-speed gearbox, or we've got a single speed, and a lot of people don't want the extra expense, or they don't want the extra weight of having a multi-gear system, because they live in London where there aren't many hills, and in truth the motor, as you just pointed out, drives you forward from the moment you put your weight on the pedal. So it's pretty good fun.
Does it, I mean, this what's the colour we call this? This is a very light grey, isn't it?
Yeah, this is a warm grey and it's matte. And we've got a kind of, we've got a yellow, we've got a graphite, and we've got a kind of olive. They're all matte. We've gone for a matte look across the bike. We think it's more minimalist. And yeah, we're really happy with the colour palette. We will add more colours as we go forward, but we're starting with 4 colours for now.
Yeah, and I must admit, you know, I think that whole minimalist, stripped down aesthetic really plays beautifully with these simple colour choices that you've made.
Yeah, it's something that we started with that idea of minimalism from day one. Taking away the chain, taking away the derailleur, you know, embedding all the cables, which many bikes do, but it just cleans the whole bike up and declutters it.
Mm. Another question was around accessories. Are you offering any accessories?
Mudguards. Everyone asks about mudguards. So yeah, we will offer mudguards and perhaps panniers as we go forward. But mudguards definitely, and beyond that, we're working on a charging stand as well. So for home use, it's more like a track stand that you put the bike on at night and plug it in and it charges.
So how do you charge the bike?
Yeah, there's 2 ways of charging the Bosch system, and one is to go directly through the port here, which is probably something you can do at home, If you're not with your bike during the day, such as when you're parking in a bike park at work, you can unlock the battery here, it drops out in your hand, you take it up to your desk and you charge it in there.
Right, and how long for a full charge?
A full charge between 2 and 3 hours,
Okay.
with a fast charger,
Yeah.
which is what we're delivering the bikes with.
Perfect. Well, thank you, Craig.
Thank you.
And thank you to all of you who joined us today. And if anyone has any further questions, don't hesitate to put them directly to either of us. And all that remains to say is just enjoy the rest of the London Design Festival.
Thanks very much.